All right, we're back. We are COMP123 in the summer 2019 semester at Centennial, and we are week 11, part 3 of our broadcast this week. And in earlier versions, we talked about assignment 5. We also discussed, some other things in terms of menus and database access. So you can see now that we're in this section where we've got our database working at this point, and we have something that looks like this. We have our splash screen, and we go to our database. We see some sample data, and what I want to do now is talk about some additional things. And I've got a little PowerPoint that I've set aside for this one to talk about data files. Now, you guys have done data files already. You guys did streams, so writing and reading, but you did it in a console application. This is all new stuff today, right? So what we need to do today is we have to do this with a Windows form application. And in the console application, you guys learn streaming, but there's also an older way of doing it with simple file load, which is right here. So again, you have a form. Here's the idea. You have some data in the form. You write output from the form to a data file, and then on the other side, you read data from the file to the data form, another form, right? And simple file I/O is actually something that's been kind of deprecated over the little while. It's very simple. We don't use streams in this one, and I'm going to skip these. This is just for you, so that if you wanted to look at this on your own, if you want to do some other kinds of file handling, you can. But this is the one we normally use, is .NET file handling. And what we do with .NET file handling is we use streams, and we use the namespace system.io, right? So we use something called stream reader and stream writer. By the way, whenever you hear stream reader and stream writer, you're writing string files, text files, right? Next week we'll be doing basically binary files, all right? I want to try binary files next week. Good thing about strings or text files is that you can see the data. Bad thing is you can see the data, right? So we don't want people to see the data. We use binary files, and actually they're more compact, faster to access, and you can actually encrypt them nicely. So for this week, we're going to use stream reader and stream writer, which you guys should know about already. So again, the way we would do it is, for stream writer, we're going to make an object, write stuff out to the file, and then close the file. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to use writeLine to target our output to the file. So example would be like this. We have our general form, stream writer, and then the object name, and then the constructor function. And we have two options that are very prevalent. One is just the file name, and then followed by the second option, which is, do I want to append to this file or make a new one? If I put true there, then I add to the file. If I don't put that there, then I just make a new file, okay? That's the way it was done. And also, if you want to specify a raw path, you can use the @ sign. I recommend that over this, right? Where you can use the @ sign and put in a raw path in there, and then you can specify a specific path to your file. However, all this is bad because it's going to be hard-coded. We don't want to hard-code anything. We want to use another construct later on if we have time today. I don't think we're going to have time. The writeLine method, basically what you want to do is you want to, whatever you're writing from, so for example, I have my stream writer, I'm going to writeLine some kind of string. That's what's going to happen every single time. I should convert everything to string if I can, okay? And then you're going to press, let's say, the save button or some kind of button. It's going to write everything out, and you must clean up your stuff. And one of the things you can do is you can close, but I also recommend you should dispose of the stream writer object. So close and dispose. We're going to show that in a bit, okay? On the other side, if you're going to do the stream reader, it's the exact same but the opposite. So you're going to use stream reader class. You're going to use readLine to read stuff from the stream reader class one line at a time, and you're going to inject that data into a string container, all right? And one thing that we have to do, because we're reading, we should use a try catch, because we don't know if we're going to get an empty file. We don't know if the file name is incorrect. Lots of stuff can break our code, so we're going to use a try catch in here. Also notice we're going to learn something new about Messagebox. Messagebox, what we're going to talk about, is like an alert in JavaScript, which is terrible. It is horrible. We never use alerts. By the way, if you're ever told to use an alert in JavaScript by a professor, it wouldn't be me, right? I wouldn't do it because alerts are terrible. They're terrible for design. However, where they're really good is if Are you sure you want to delete this? That's a good use of an alert, right? Are you sure you want to close your application without saving? That's a good use of an alert. For debugging purposes, to show you the alert in your face, that's a good use of an alert. But to have alerts that say, hello, welcome to my app, that's really bad use of the alert. Don't ever do that, all right? So we don't want to communicate with the client that way, with the user. We only want to communicate them when it's absolutely necessary with the message box, okay? So we have a try catch. We're going to do these read lines. We're going to use the read line method to read data from the file into some kind of text container like we talked about, or string container. And then if we're going to do this in a loop, we would use the peek function, peek method, to see if we're at the end of line. If we're not at the end of line, if it's not equal to -1, that means we have more stuff to read, then we can read more things in. But in this case, for assignment 5, and for the little example I'm going to give you, there's only going to be one record, not multiple records. So you don't have to use the peek method. I'm just putting it there for completion. All right, let's do that. Let's do this thing. So that's a little bit quick and dirty on how to do files. But I want to be able to do a couple things. First of all, here in my application, I'm going to start. And notice what I get here is this. What I really want is when I click on a cell, I want the entire row to be highlighted. How do I do that? Okay, well, first of all, let's take a look at the structure behind this whole thing. If I go to my mainform.cs, you can see that, just like in the last video showed, there is this student table adapter that fills up when I use my load function. And it basically calls this section A database dataset and looks at the student table of the dataset and fills up my data grid view, right? I don't have to do anything with this. This happens automatically, and it's okay for me to leave this in here the way it is, all right? Later on, if we wanted to do full CRUD, create, read, update, delete, we wouldn't be able to do it exactly this way. There's other functionalities we would put in here to have more control. But for now, this is good enough. What we want now, though, is when I click on this thing, so if I go back to main form, when I click on this thing, I want it to update. And there's a couple of event handlers that will help us with this. If I go to my properties, and if I go to my event handlers, you can see that the default event for this is the cell content click event. By the way, guys, this is wrong. If I click, it's only on the content. What about the cell itself, right? So I'll tell you that the better one, but not the right one, it's not the right one, is cell click. Let's use that one. So if I double click on cell click for now, you can see that it's going to bring up an event handler like we normally get. Here it is. Here's cell click, right? And what I want to put in here is a way to access the data grid view. I know that my data grid view is called the student data grid view, all right? So I can say something like this. var student data grid view, right? So let's say my, actually, let's just call it student data grid view first. Student data grid view dot current cell. I can look at the current cell that's selected, right? Dot. And I want the row index of my current cell. I can get this information. Now imagine if I had to type this stuff over and over again. Student data grid view, current cell dot row index, and I want to take that information and inject it somewhere. It's crazy. So I make aliases. I say var row index, right, is equal to this. And this would be like almost like a local scope alias, right, for some common things. So my row index obviously is an integer, so I could have replaced var with an int, but I'm not going to. And what I really want to do is something that looks like this. I want to get my current cell, right, whatever it is, or my whole row. That's what I want, my whole row. And the way I get my row is student grid view dot rows, and then I'm going to inject row index, the current row index. And I can say that selected is equal to true, because selected for the row is a property. I can select the row and make it equal to true. However, look how big this thing is, right? Wouldn't it be nice if I had an alias for rows too? I think so. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to say that var rows is equal to this. I'm going to need it later. And I can just simply put in there rows. Does that make sense? So I'm making aliases That's what they are. They're just pointers. Now look at this one. This is a really big one. Data grid view row collection. Right? I'm never going to guess that data type. This is where var makes sense. I'm never going to guess the type of var, and I'm going to be using it here. All right? Great. So now I select it as true, but wouldn't it be nice when I click on it, I want the entire row to be selected, right? So this is what this does. It selects the row. Let's see what happens. So if I take the row, and if I run this now, and if I select it like this, it selects it, but it has a bit of a delay. Look. Did it? Did it? Did it? That's what you should get right now. Yeah? But this is bad. There's actually another thing we can check. Oh, by the way, one more thing. I'll give you guys time to catch up too. What about if I can, should a user be able to do this? Look, and modify the name? No. You're not going to be able to let the user modify the CPU in the order. No. This should not be modifiable. So how do I change this? If I go to my main form design, if I click on this little side arrow here, this little smart arrow, I can uncheck enable adding, enable editing, enable deleting. I want to uncheck those things from here, from my smart arrow. And the other thing I also want to do is if I go to my properties, and if I look at the properties of my data grid view, notice that there's only 2 of them here, or 3 of them, but I can also disallow user to resize my columns. So I've changed that to false. I can also say that my allow user to resize rows, that's also false. I don't want to allow them to happen. That's bad. Those are all bad things. And then also my selected, if I go down, scroll down, there's a selection mode. My selection mode should be full row select. Full row select. And that's a different selection mode, which means now if I use full row select and if I press start, you can see that when I start my data grid view and I click anywhere, it automatically selects the entire row, which is what I want.
So you don't need that code.
Put it anyway.
Okay. Because it's kind of written.
Also, one more thing. Multi-select. There's also something for multi-select. Multi-select should be false. Because it doesn't make sense that I should be ever able to multiply select multiple rows. That doesn't make any sense. I should only be able to select one row. So now I can't do this. I can't select more than one row at a time. It should stop me, and it does. Right? So again, that's multi-select. That's an option. Multi-select is false. Alright, so now that I've got that, let's go back to my main form.cs. Sure, I can leave it there, but it's a little bit redundant. Let's just leave it there. But what I really want to do now is I want to be able to take the data from those rows, from that row, and I want to be able to parse it, right? So remember that rows is a collection. Here's a collection. It's a collection of, it's a data grid view row collection. What type of collection is it? Do you know? Is it a list? Well, if it was a list, we'd be able to do something like this, right? We'd be able to do something like for each, right? And for each row in rows, the rows collection, I should be able to do something like, rows dot value, and of course I can't. There is no rows dot value, because guess what? It's not a list type collection, and this will never work. However, if I used a for loop, I could say that the index, and by the way, I want to know what the count is. I want to think about remember, each row has a bunch of columns. Each column represents a field. I want to know how many fields I have. I need to know the column count. So I can do that by doing this. I can say that var column count is equal to student data grid view dot column count. Again, I don't want to say that big student data grid view thing. It's too cumbersome. So I'm making an alias for this, and I'm going to put that in here in length, column count. Make sense? So now I can loop through. I can say that, okay, rows index dot value, not set value. Sorry. So again, my rows index is wrong. It's rows. It's actually cells. What I want. Let me go back. I'm ahead of myself. So every row has a bunch of cells, yeah? So I want each of the cells. It's a cells collection that I want, not the rows collection, but same thing. If I go to row var cells, then I can say that my row index, it's got to be this, rows index dot cells, the cells collection, is what I'm looking for, right? The cells collection. And here what I want to put in is cells index dot value dot toString. And that will give me the string, the value of my, the stuff that's in the cell. And of course I want to take this and assign it somewhere. And for now, let's make an output string. So I'll make a string, a string, we'll call this output string, right? And we'll make it equal to the string dot empty, so the empty string. And we'll say that output string plus equals to cells index value toString. And we'll add in a little space at the end, just so that way when we combine them, you have one big string. Make sense? And then just to test it, let's use a message box to show it. So we can say that message box, this is a new thing, messagebox.show, and show can just simply show a message like the string, output string. Right? Yay! Let's try this out and see if it works. Okay, take a look now, guys. This is what the code looks like. So for people who are watching the video, again, I'm using the cell click method, which is wrong. I'm telling you, it's wrong. You're going to see it's wrong in a second, and you're going to know why it's wrong. Hopefully you'll be able to tell me why it's wrong before I tell you. All right, ready? Let's run this thing. All right, so 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then boom. Notice that nothing's popped up. If I click this, though, it says, here's my details, right? And if I click this away and click this one, here's my details. And if I click this one, here's my details. So I'm getting the data now that I want. However, did you notice something? When it first came, did I get the details? Why? Because nothing clicked on that row, guys. Which means click is the wrong thing. We can't use click because I can't move my mouse to click on it, right? It's got to do automatically. When it loads, the first thing that's selected is the first data that I get, right? So how do you change that? We can't use the click event at all. And also, this whole thing is wrong because data grid view cell event args is not compatible with the other click events. Notice that this and this are two different things, right? So this won't be compatible with anything else. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So what I really want, this is the real event, and I could have shown you this from the beginning, but that's not fun, right? What I want to show you is this. Look, the event, the default event is the cell content click. That's not right. The cell click, that's not right. So we're going to not use this one. What we really want to use is the SelectionChanged Event. If I double click this, you can see that they're not compatible, guys. Look, event args and data grid view cell event args are different delegates. Different delegates means I'll never be able to use the same one, which means that this is completely wrong. I need to grab all of this, please do this, grab all of this, cut it, and put it into this other one. That's the one that should be used, SelectionChanged Event. And we can safely get rid of this one in a second. When we go back up to main form, go to my properties, and I can just highlight and, highlight and try that again. Go to my cell click, and if I'm careful enough, I can just erase it, and when we go back to my main form, it's gone. Okay, so why is this better? I'm telling you it's better, but you don't have to believe me, right? Here, I'll show you why it's better. If I run this thing now, 1 steamboat, 2 steamboat, 3 steamboats, and then, hey, look, it comes up. But look what happened. It won't let me. This is why modal forms are bad. It won't even continue. It won't let me continue to my load form until I click OK. But what this is showing me is the data is coming right away. It's automatically selecting and showing me the data, which is what I want. Okay, so I don't need my message box anymore. That was just for debugging. Let's get rid of it. What I really want is some kind of label in the main form where I can show my data. So I'm going to go to my toolbox, and I'm going to go into Common Controls, and I'm going to drag and drop a label in there. Here it is. In my label, I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to go into the property side of things. On the top, I'm going to call this the selection label. Selection label. Right, there's my selection label. I'm going to make my auto size false so that it can span the entire side of my screen here. Put it up a little bit underneath. I'm going to change my back color from my label to white. So here's white, so you can see that. And my border style to fixed single. I'm also going to change my text align property to center, middle center, and then get rid of the text. So this selection label is where I want my data to go. I want my data to come here, not in my message box, right? And it should happen automatically. As soon as my form loads, boom, I've got my data in there, which, by the way, satisfies Assignment 5's criteria for when you click on something, it pulls that data into a little label. Now let's code it. So I want to go here and say that my label, which is my selection label, dot text, is equal to my output string. Selection label dot text is equal to output string. Of course, my selection label is just this thing. And if I run, you can see now that automatically I get my information. And if I click somewhere else, I get that information, or whatever information I want. John Wick, let's leave that guy. John Wick is the best guy. Makes sense? So that satisfies Assignment 5's requirements for when you click on something, you pull the data. Now, here's the next part. I need to save this somehow to my file, right? And imagine if I have this data, I'm going to go from one form to the next form to the third form, whatever. There's got to be a data container to hold my data, right, from the database. The perfect thing is to create a class or some kind of struct to hold your data, right? Let's make that now. I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, and I'm going to make a new class. Right-click, add, new class, right? And I'm going to call this class the student class, right? Because the student class, I want it to hold the data, right? One thing to note is I should probably make the student class public, because it's not public right now. And here's my stuff. I want to make a couple of properties. One property for the class is going to be an integer, right? ID. That's my first property. And then I'm going to have the other ones, right? My other property is going to be a string, which is going to be the student ID. Again, I'm just adding properties here. Prop. And then a string, which is going to be my first name. And one more. Prop. A string that's going to be my last name. Okay, so that is my student class. But take a look here. My student class is so basic, it could really be a struct. And what's the difference between a struct and a class? Public versus private in C++. In C#, it's reference type versus value type. And the question is, can a struct be inherited from? Can it inherit from? The answer is no. And this is where a struct is very simple. It is a structure that holds things together and allows you to create a little data container, and actually works a little bit faster and lower in terms of memory than class does. However, later on we're going to need a class anyway, so we're going to leave it as a class. Okay, cool. So we got this. And now what we need to do, of course, is go back to program, and we need to instantiate it, declare it, and instantiate the class. So we're going to go to public, static. We're going to make a new class, which is called student. And down where we instantiate the other stuff, we're going to instantiate that too. We're going to say that student is equal to a new student. And by the way, if we had more time, I would make a different constructor that allows me to give some default values for the student. For example, student name might be blank or whatever. Right now, there is no student name, right? So there's no, I'm not putting any safeguards because of a time perspective. Alright, so this is where I want my data to store. I want to store it here before I save it. Let's do that now. How does that look? So again, going back to main form, right? I've got my data container, and I'm in here in my student data grid view SelectionChanged event. I've already output my string, and now what I want to do is I want to take this data, that I got, the selected data, and I want to store it inside of my student class. So program.student.id is equal to, and now question, can I loop through my class properties somehow? In JavaScript you can. Yeah, that's JavaScript's power, right? I can loop through. If I have a class in JavaScript, I can actually loop through each of the properties in the class like they're a collection. In fact, in JavaScript, they are a collection. But here, not so much, right? Here, the properties of a class. So I have to kind of assign them separately. I mean, I could make it happen too in C#, but it's a little bit more involved. All right, so program student.id, and that equals to the first cell. So I'm going to take this cell value to string, this part, and I'm going to say that my first cell, which is cell 0, is going to be converted to string. But guess what? ID is actually an integer. It needs an integer, which means I got to convert this to an int. So I'm going to say int.parse. I did this on purpose. I could have made it a string. And I want to convert all this to an integer. Okay, but cell 0 doesn't tell me anything. If you looked at my code at this point, you're like, what? What's cell 0? You would have to kind of do a little bit more investigation in order for me to understand what that means. I need a friendly name for my cells. Cell 0, cell 1, cell 2. I want that to be, and to me, it's groaning for an enumeration. All right. However, there's going to be some issues. Let me explain. Student. I could make a separate enumeration file, but for my laziness, I'm going to make the enumeration file in the same file. We're going to call it enum. We're going to call this student, and again, student fields. And in my student fields, there's going to be a few, right? The first one is it's going to match these ones, right? So I'm going to say ID, right? And we're going to make them capitals, ID, because it's an enumeration. Student ID. First underscore name and last underscore name. Now you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but you'll see what the advantage is in a second. And then number of fields. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. So now if you notice this is ID is 0, student ID is 1, first name is 2, and I don't have to remember it. Right? More organization. Again, going back. I'm going to go back to my main form.cs, and instead of putting cell 0, I want to put student field, which is this one, dot ID. However, it's not going to work because student field is not an integer, so I just have to cast it. So it looks a little funky, but it works. So when you first look at this, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's really crazy. However, I've built it up with you so you understand what it means. All right? And you know that I'm looking at the student field ID. That's the one I want. The ID for the student is the cell index that I'm using. So this is cell 0, right? Now it's a matter of copy paste. So let's just copy paste. I'm only do it once and then I'll copy paste again, because not all of them are integers, right? So this one is going to be student ID, which is going to be of type string, so I can get rid of this, the int.parse part. And I can also change this to student ID, right? And then that makes more sense to me now, right? And again, you might think there's some redundancies, and yes, there is. There's other ways to do this, but I'm trying to give you some ideas of what you can do differently. First name, and then here the same thing, first name. You can see how fast that is. And then last name. I can't make mistakes as easily this way. And then last name. And if I do make mistakes, I can identify them. Hey, look, I put first name in the last name or whatever. Whereas if I put 0, 1, 2, 3, maybe I made a mistake. Done. This transfers the information from my cell data that's inside my data grid view into my student class. Now it's there. Now, once I have this data, I can go from one form to the next form to the third form. I have it. I'm good. Right? Are you with me? You may not be with me typing, but are you with me understanding? That's the thing. All right? So, this is good, but I want to be able to save my file. How do I do that? I'm going to go back to my main form designer, and you can see that in my file I have this save button, but I also have this menu save. Let's double click on the menu save, which generates this save toolstrip menu item.click event. And I also want this event, this save button, to point to the same thing. So again, when I go here, I'm going to go to Solution Explorer, properties of the save button, properties. I'm going to go to the events, and my click event, I'm going to point to my save toolstrip menu item event, the same one that I chose for my file save. And now what I want to do with this is I want to use my stream writer, right? Like we talked about before. That's what the main thing of this video is all about. Stream writer. So in order for me to do this, I want to do this. I want to say that stream writer, right? And we'll call this the output stream. Don't say it. Someone's going to say it, right? Don't say it. Is equal to new stream writer, right? I'm going to put in the name of my file, which we're going to call student.txt. Yay, no one said it. Yeah, see, you said it. System.io. Don't say it. I told you not to say it. Because all I have to do is here it goes using system.io, and it fixes that problem, right? But you said it. See, I lured you. All right, and then of course what I can do is I can say output string, right? Dot write line. So I'm going to write out to the file now. And what am I going to write? Well, this stuff, guys. This stuff, right? So I'm going to say this. The stuff from my class, not from this, right? Because this doesn't exist in this context, right? So my ID, and then I can just copy paste these 4 pieces of data. So student ID, first name, and last name. All right, cool. So I've written everything, and then I'm going to close. So this first thing is open a stream to write. That's what I'm doing here. Next is write stuff to the file, right? Next is close, clean up, right? Which is a couple things to clean up. Output string dot close, I recommend, as well as output string dot dispose. I recommend those 2 things. All right. That way, what will happen is with those 2 things, you'll be able to clean up your memory and close your files. Okay, but this is nice. But you know what the nicer one is to even be safer than this? You can use a using statement. So you can say using stream writer output string is equal to this, and you can create a little closure where I can grab all this stuff and put it in there. That's the safer way to do it, because now that lives and dies in that little enclosure right there. Using. And you know what's even nicer than this? I don't like using this. This is not a lot of control. I like using this. So file.open, and then in there you can put this, plus you can put the file mode, right, which we're going to use next week, of just create. Right? That is more explicit. And maybe if I put in the right number of brackets, we'll be good, like this. Okay.
The file already exists.
Sorry?
Because it's file mode.create.
Yes. Because to me, it's very explicit. I know exactly what I'm doing. Here's my file. Here's what my file mode is. And if I really want to, if I want to put append, I would file create or open or create. That's another option. And then comma true. And then I can append.
In this case, if the file already exists,
doesn't matter. I'll overwrite it. I'll kill it. I'll overwrite the file. All right. Let's try this thing. Let's see if it works. Right. I want to save this thing. So I'm going to press start, and I'm going to go here to my file. And now that I have Tom, I want to save Tom to a file. Click save. Uh-oh. I got no feedback. I clicked save, but I got nothing. I don't know if it worked or not. Let's check it. Here, both are the same. Here or here, the same. I have no output. Huh? They're connected. But I have no way of knowing if it worked. So let's see if it worked. So the way to go, of course, is go here and, no, actually, let's just stop this. And we'll go to my Solution Explorer. Here's my Solution Explorer. And if you right click on my project and we go down to open folder in Explorer, we go into the bin debug file and we can see that there's a student.txt. That's where it gets stored by default. If I right click, I'm going to open it with my favorite editor, Visual Studio Code, and you can see that I'm going to have my code, which is 1, and my file. Now again, remember, good, I can see my files. Bad, I can see my files. I don't want to see my files. I want to use binary, and then we're going to do that next week. All right? But for now, I know it saved everything. I can lose JSON too, but this is fine. Binary is better. Okay, so, and besides binary, what you can do is you can save out the whole class by itself. I can write out a class, right? Not just primitive types. Okay, so let me just go back. So now we go to this, and what I want to do is I want to do one more thing, all right? And we're almost done with this video, believe it or not. I want to be able to go next, and I want to go to another form that we don't have yet. And in that form, I want to load everything from the file and test it. Now, I want to show you some problems that we're going to have. And I want you to understand how to do this. Let's make a new form. So right click, I'm going to make a new form, add, new form. And we're going to call this form the student info form. Gee, it sounds like the product info form from your assignment. Student info form. And my student info form, I got to configure it a little bit. So I'm going to go back to properties. I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to go to font. And don't ask me again if there's a template. 20, because there is, but there isn't. And then here, 800 by 600. I know, you're laughing. 800 by 600 here, right? And we also want to make this center screen. Here, center screen. We want to change this to student info form, right? All the regular stuff. And now, of course, this form doesn't do anything for us because we want to have some stuff. So I'm going to go to my toolbox, and this is where we're going to start adding some more things. My label, I'm going to add a label in there, which this label is going to be called the ID label. ID label. And my ID label is going to be, my auto size is going to be false for this one. Here it is. And what I also want to do is, let's make sure that the text align option is going to be to the right and middle, like this. And we're going to put words ID in there so we can see that. And let's make it just a little bit bigger, something like this big. Okay, so about 232 by 63 is what I have. And I'm going to control drag this ID label to the right. When I control drag, I can put it right next to this one. And this ID, I'm going to change the name of the label to ID data label. ID data label. Alright? And instead of it being like this, we're going to make the back color white. And the border style fixed single. Alright? And of course, it's not going to say anything by default. It's going to say nothing. So there's not going to be any kind of text in the middle. And this is where the ID is going to be. It's pretty good size, I think. But I want to control drag, again, down. Control drag and make another set. And now my ID is going to be, instead of ID, it's going to be student ID. Student ID label. This is going to say student ID. Student ID. And this is going to be the student ID data label. Bigger. Student ID data label. Okay, good. Now I have 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Control drag. Quick way of making labels. This one is going to be my first name label. First name label. I might as well name them all now. First name data label. First name data label. This one's going to be the last name label. Last name label. And this one's going to be the last name data label. Last name data label. Alright, so we got all those, but now they have to say the right things. So let's just go down here, and this is going to say first name. And this one's going to say last name. Okay, and you know what? First names and last names have to be quite long, much longer than this. We'll make them span this whole way. So now we can see that we have some leeway on the first labels here. Let's just adjust them a little bit. And now we can get this entire area here. And what I'll do is probably just center it just a bit in the middle. There we go. Alright, so we got our labels. This is where I'm going to load up my data. I'm going to take my data, load it in. I'm going to save this file. One thing I'm missing is some way of navigating back and another way to navigate to this. So if I go back to my main form design, I want a button for this. So I'm going to grab and drag a button in this. I'm going to call this button the next button. So again, I'm going to go to my properties. And I want to call this the next button. We've done this before, right? So this will be the next button. Next button. Right? And it'll say next in the text. Right? And we'll just size it so it's appropriate. Something like that. And to the right. There we go. And I'll copy this button here and I'll go to my student form and I'll paste that in there too. Except this will be the back button now. So it'll say back. And it'll be called the back button. Back button. There. Back and next. Alright? So we have a little form, back and next, and that's good, but guess what? We need to register this form in the program. So we're going to go back to program.cs, there it is. And in my program.cs I need to register this form, which is going to be the student ID form. So public static student ID form, or info form, sorry, and it'll be student info form. And then of course we're going to instantiate them just like we did before. So again, student info form is going to be a new, I'll fix that, student info form. And that'll be lowercase s. Okay, so that's the student info form. We have that now, and now that we have it, we can go to my main form.cs. Again, I'm just adding a reference to the student info form in my program. I go to my main form.cs, and what I want is in my main form, if I double click on my next button, it'll pull up this little event handler where I want to say something like program.studentinfoform.show and this.hide. Okay, that's what I want. At the same time, let's fix the other one. My student info form, I'm going to go to my back button and do the same thing. I'm going to say that program.mainform.show and this.hide. Okay, so that kind of shows and hides both the forms, right, like we've seen before. Show and hide. However, I want this form, when this form loads, I want this form to populate with data that I've saved. So it's going to access the file that I've saved and load the data in. That's what it's going to do. So how does this work? Well, I need to go back into my student form. And now, question. I want it to load the data on load. However, you're going to hear, I want to make the load event happen. But actually it's wrong. The load event is only going to trigger one time ever for the form, as soon as it's created the first time. Even if I hide the form and show the form, it's never going to trigger again. I need another event. And there is another event called activated that I want to use. I want to use the activated event. Let's do that. So again, I'm going to go back to my student form, student ID info form, the design side. I'm going to go to properties, click on the events, and you can see that the default event for my form, it looks like the load event, right? The load event is the form, the default event. But I don't want this one. I want the activated event, this one. I want to double click there. I also need a way of closing down my form. I need to take care of that too. So I might as well do that now in the form closing event. So those two events. Again, my form closing is just going to do an application.exit. Alright, and there's some stuff we can do later on, not this week, but next week to clean that up. And again, what I want to do here is in my student form activated is exactly what we did, but the opposite when we did our save. I want to load. So again, just to save time, I'm going to say using stream writer, right? We'll call this the stream reader. Stream reader, and we're going to make this the input stream, right? Is equal to a new stream reader, right? But however, remember I want to use my funky file.load. File.load. I'm not getting any code ending right now because I'm not doing that. And let's just fix that problem because it's driving me crazy. So I want to use file.load, and what I want to say is in the file I want to load, the path is going to be student.txt, and the file mode is going to be open, right? And that should take care of everything, I think. Why is file load giving me a problem? File does not contain file open. How about file open, guys? That might be better. And then I want to do one of these curly braces, which opens this up. And then once I've got it open, now it's the opposite. I want to say that I want to load all this stuff into my class first, and from my class I want to take it to my text, right? So again, just to save time, I'm going to go back here and I want to do this. I want to grab all this stuff. And now we're just going to rename stuff. So instead of input string, output string, it's input string. Instead of write line, it's read line. And instead of write lining or read lining like this, I'm going to copy this part. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say equals to, and I can't do this because it has to be converted to integer, so it's going to be int.parse for the first one. This. And then the next ones are going to be easier because it's going to be one of these. I'm going to cut this one, go over here, put it over here, is equal to this, right? And the same goes with the other ones. If I can type properly without making mistakes, maybe. Again, just a copy-paste operation, so it's not as bad. Alright, that is reading everything from my file. So read stuff from the file into the student class, student object. That's what it is, right? And this, yes? Yeah, I'm doing it so that way I'm storing it out and then I'm putting it back into the student. I'm replacing the stuff that's in the student object with something else. In this case. Now you don't have to do it this way. I'm just doing it. I'm showing you how it works, right? So open file stream to read. Okay, and then of course I want to clean up. So I'm going to clean up down here. So clean up, and we're just going to say that input stream dot close and input stream dot dispose. Okay, again, you probably don't need to dispose, but I'm doing it anyway. So this does the reading part. Now, when I read stuff, that just reads it into my program, right? Into my class. But I need to output my stuff from my class into my files, into my labels. So that's the next part. So I'm going to say that it's kind of like what I did before, right? But in the reverse. So again, if I'm going to go back to my main form, you see I did that over here. I did this, right? But I want to do the reverse of this, right? Kind of like the reverse, right? So I can kind of copy paste some of it. So really what I'm saying is I'll start with ID label, data label, dot text is equal to this. Right? And now this is .toString. I have to do toString once just for this one, but the rest of them should be fairly straightforward. So student ID data label .text is equal to this. So there's a bit of copy pasting. It's not as bad. And the first name data label .text is equal to this. Now I'm being very, this is a very contrived example, guys. It's not realistic, but the idea that you have everything you need, all the code you need to make sure your program runs, right, for 7.5. All right, cool. So that should take care of everything. Do you agree? So here's what I've done, just to recap, right? Read stuff from the database, saved it in a student class, saved it onto the file, loaded it from the file into the student class, and output out to labels. That's what I'm doing. But we already had it in the student class, so I'm not really doing anything. I'm just like going in a roundabout way, just so that way I can show you how saving and loading works. However, there's a problem with this, and I want to show you the problem, and I want to see if you can see it. Right? We're going to fix this next week. But let's start and talk about the problem for 1 second. All right, so I loaded up, and I want to make sure this works. Here it is. I want to save Peter Parker. Save. Great. All right. And if I click next, I'm going to go here, and you see that Peter Parker loaded. Back. I'm going to change to Tom and go next. Peter Parker's still there because it's loading Peter Parker, right? I didn't save, right? Okay. I also want to change this. This alignment's no good. I don't like it. Let's just go back and save that alignment, right? So again, going back to this, and I'm just going to change these ones to center. So again, I'm going to go to my properties, and I'm going to go to my properties, and I go to text align at the bottom, and it's going to be to center, right? Middle center. And let's try that again. So I should have Peter Parker there again, right? Let's just run this again. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And I go back, and if I go next, you can see Peter Parker still there. This is good, right? So it loaded from the file. I proved it to you. Now, here's what the problem is. Back. Tom, save. Next. Why is this? Did it save Tom? Did it save Tom? It did actually. It was trying to save Tom, but I didn't give it enough time to save Tom. Remember, it's file access, guys. It's asynchronous. It's going to do whenever it feels like it. Ready? Watch. Save. Next. And then, did it work? I don't know, right? Back. File, save. It's the same thing. Tom, right? Tom is what's being saved. Next. How come it's not loading? Right? It's loading unactivated, right? And let's see if it actually saved. If I go back, if I close this up, and if I go to my files, so I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, right? And let's look at the solution again. So I'm going to go to my File Explorer and go to here, to bin, to debug, and then look at that. So again, what I want to do is I want to open it, my favorite Explorer thing. Do I see Tom here? No. Why? It did it before. How come it's not doing it now? It won't even save it again. What's wrong? I'm creating the file, right? So my file create will override what's over here. Remember, I saved this before with Tom before, right? So what's the problem? Why is it not working? Let's try it again. So again, I go back to start. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Great. Tom. I clicked onto it. Save. Right? Next. Back. I clicked onto it. Right? Click onto it. Save. Next. Back. I click once to Robert Bruce Banner. Next. Click back. Click onto it. Right? Save. Next. Back. Double click. Save. Next. What the hell? What's going on? No. No. All of them work the same way. No. What's happening is it's the timing, right? And even if I was to say it's saved or not, let's do this. Let's make it a test, okay? And this is what I'll leave with you guys as a thing to fix this problem, right? If I go back to here to my student ID and I know that I want to save in my main form.cs, right? I could use this is a great place to put a debug, right? My debug is going to say saved, right? Yeah, your thing's saved. Thank you very much, Tom. You saved everything, right? In my save tool strip menu item, which both access, right? So I go here and I say something like Messagebox. Messagebox is actually quite powerful, and I want to talk about this just for 1 second. Messagebox.show, and you can see that there's 21 overloads, right, for Messagebox. One thing I can say is, you know, again, I can say that file saved successfully, right? And then I can say something like saving, that's the title, and then I can say Messagebox buttons, right? I can say that my Messagebox buttons are OK, the OK button, or I can also specify OK cancel, yes, no, a bunch of different kinds of buttons, right? And I can also use Messagebox icons, a Messagebox icon that's like an info, okay? An info icon. So then if I go here, I just want to put this on 2 lines so you can see it, right? This is my Messagebox. My Messagebox is quite awesome, actually, right? And on top of that, my Messagebox itself returns a dialog result. My dialog results can be whatever I want. OK, cancel, yes, no, whatever. And I can actually test for it. If Messagebox.show blah, 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 blah is equal to OK, then do this. Else, do this, right? I can do that. And that's why Messagebox.show is so awesome, right? And if I press play now, you can see that I'm going to go here. And if I want to save something, I want to save Tom again. So save. And it's going to say, hey, file saved successfully. Press OK. Press next. Tom, right? Back. I'm going to click Robert Bruce Banner, right? Save. File saved successfully. OK. Next. Robert Bruce Banner. Back. I'm going to click Natasha Romanoff. Save. File saved successfully. Next. Natasha Romanoff. But where we got problems is when we do this. Back. Peter. This. Save. This. Next. And it doesn't come up. Right? Why is it not coming up? Because I'm too fast. The file is going to save in its own time when it feels like it. That's the honest truth. You got to give it time for it to save and for it to come back. And it's random. It's not because I double clicked. It's not because I'm slowing things down with the Messagebox. It literally just takes time and it's asynchronous. That's the biggest problem. Also, I've got it in that using statement, which is another reason why it's happening. So we've got some inconsistencies, and it works sometimes, but doesn't work other times. Please be careful. Be cognizant that this happens. This is going to happen, right? Here's what can really help us. Right now, our files that we're saving and loading, our file name is hard-coded. And next week when we get back together, actually for you guys, it's going to be Friday, right? Friday when I see you guys, we're going to fix this problem. We're going to make it so we can use the open file dialog and save file dialog components. And just to steer you in the right direction, if you guys want to skip ahead and do that yourself before I see you, if you go to the main form design, and if you look at my toolbox, there's different components here. So if I look at components, there's these kind of components, right? With help per provider and blah, blah. But there's also a dialogues components. And under dialogues, there's 2. There's open file dialog and save file dialog. And those 2 things are pre-done by Microsoft, right? There's also a color dialog, a folder browser dialog, a font dialog if you want to change your fonts and give stuff. It's all pre-done for you, right? And guys, they look perfect. When you add these dialog boxes to your app, when you press open, it opens up like you normally are used to with the file dialog and says, okay, what do you want? You want this directory? Go here. And you can specify the default directory. And you can specify the default file name. We're going to cover all that on Friday. Guys, thank you so much. We actually made it. We did everything, right, in like way less time than anyone else did it today, right? So you guys are awesome. Did I say you sucked before? Right? I was wrong, right? You guys are awesome. All right. So bear with me as we do this. I'm going to put this up on GitHub for you guys, so it'll be up on GitHub in a second. But I'll see you guys on Friday, okay? Thanks.